झालंय सुरू. आपण स्टार्ट करू शकतो.
करूयात स्टार्ट.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
I welcome you all in this important session on invasive species. Good morning to my friends from India and good afternoon for the friends outside. From February 2024, we are listening the various aspects and facts on the invasives. Actually, what is defined or termed or called or named as the species may be plant, animal, insect, fish, anything which are not native to the particular locality. They may be introduced knowingly, unknowingly, and get settled there. Not only settle, but actually they become aggressive, more encroach on the local species as they do not have any biological control over there and they have a very favorable in the favorable conditions. They grew, they expand themselves and turn as unwanted. We may call them as weed, maybe invasive, or we can say troublesome. They break the local natural food chain, food web, and show the negative impact on the overall habitat environment. This is a real challenge for, or rather, it is impossible to for the nature lovers to set this back to the normal. Scientists, biodiversity lovers, researchers, they are trying to restore the local habitats which help with the help of national level scientists and researchers, maybe local NGOs, many volunteers, they are working all over the world, not only India and New Zealand. Till that, we listen from this Mission Devrai YouTube channel for experts from India. They share their views, and today we have an opportunity to listen our friends from New Zealand. I welcome you all. I welcome Fiona, who is Biodiversity Ranger, Christo Church, Helen Hills, active conservation practitioner, City Council, and committee member of Forest and Bird Conservation Organization, and the Mohini. All the guests and listeners, I really welcome you all in this very special session on the invasive plants. You may visit our Mission Devra YouTube channel, where you will get all views from the Indian speakers who spoke till now on our invasives. Now I request my friend Priya to introduce our today's guest. Priya, please.
thank you, Upadhyay Madam. A warm welcome to Dr. Mohini, Miss Fiona, and Miss Helen. It's indeed a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Mohini, who is my best friend. She completed her master's in commerce and did her MBA from UK, received her first PhD in HR from Pune University, completed faculty management program from a very prestigious institute, IIM Ahmedabad. In 2017, she received her second PhD from Lincoln University in career crafting at Lincoln University in New Zealand. She is a corporate trainer, a researcher, and a trustee at Quail Island, as well as a Mohe New Bush Restoration Project. She has published many research papers and articles in reputed journals with focus on women and especially indigenous people from New Zealand. We are keen to listen about the invasive species and plants from Christchurch area, New Zealand. So I welcome you all and thank you very much for coming on our Mission Devra YouTube channel. There are lots of things which I can tell about Mohini, but this is a very brief introduction. I will just tell one thing that Mohini went to New Zealand in 2012, and today she is a trustee at Quail Island as well as many restoration projects and trusts in New Zealand. That itself shows her dedication and passion for nature, and the restoration efforts are indeed incredible. Thank you very much. I hand over the mic to Mohini and request her to introduce her fellow colleagues and continue with the conversation on today's topic.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for your kind words. मला माहिती आहे तू माझी बेस्ट फ्रेंड असल्यामुळे तू जरा जास्तच कौतुक करतेस माझं नेहमी. I'm very happy to be here to present to Mission Devrai. And I find that this is an excellent way to connect to my hometown, Pune. आणि मला थोडीसं मराठीत बोलायची पण एक संधी मिळते मग ह्याच्यामुळे. तर मी आता आमचं प्रेझेंटेशन शेअर करते आणि तुम्हाला मग स्पीकरशी ओळख पण करून देते. दिसतंय ना सगळ्यांना? मला कोणतरी सांगा फक्त.
अजून नाही आलं. हा आलं.
Yes, दिसतंय.
Okay, good. Invasive plants out here on New Zealand. So basically, as Priya said, that I came to New Zealand in 2012, and I didn't really know much about New Zealand then. And all I had heard about that it's a clean, green, pure, beautiful country, which it is. But after coming here and working in different conservation programs, volunteering, I realized that what colonization has done to New Zealand's ecological balance. And as I have been working for the past 12 years, just on the weekends when I get time, I must say that I'm just a volunteer, and my two colleague speakers who are here, they are doing an amazing job in conservation. So I don't do as much as them, but I'm definitely keen and I'm interested in learning more about it as well. And this presentation has given me an opportunity to know also more about what's happening in New Zealand. I'll just show you quickly where we are, so you know what's the context of our presentation. So those of you who have been to New Zealand, you would probably know that there are two main islands, the North Island and the South Island. And we have a Stewart Island, the small Stewart Island to the south of New Zealand. And we are here. So we are going to cover a very, very small part of New Zealand. And as you can see that New Zealand is not a big country, but it's definitely varied when it comes to its nature, to the plants. Just you go from the east coast to the west coast and you see that there is different flora and fauna as well. And same with the weeds as well. So we are kind of going to cover this area today. And this is where Christchurch is, Christchurch City, and this is called Banks Peninsula. And we're going to talk about the different invasive plants in this area and also what is being done to restore the native forest. So just to tell you briefly, we have Fiona Fenton, as Anuradha madam also said and Priya introduced. So Fiona is a biodiversity ranger with the Christchurch City Council, and they cover the Port Hills and the Banks Peninsula area. Then Helen Hills, she's a conservation practitioner, and she works mainly for the Ohinetahi Nature Reserve and various other projects in and around Christchurch. So I will introduce Helen just before her talk, but I will introduce Fiona first. So we're going to present it this way. Fiona is going to talk about what they do on behalf of the Christchurch City Council in the Port Hills and the Christchurch area. Then Helen will talk about Ohinetahi, and then I will talk about Hinewai briefly. So Fiona is originally from Scotland. She came to New Zealand and she used to work in property, very different from conservation. But when she came here, she decided to take a break. and serendipity led her to the present job. And I was talking to her the other day, and she said that this is the best job in the world. So you can imagine how much she's enjoying working for conservation here. So Fiona, a dedicated, so it's not just a job. I don't think that, I mean, although it is her job, but she does it with real passion and with real interest, because I have participated in the volunteer programs that Fiona organizes, and I have seen how amazing she is. So let's hear from Fiona about what they do in the Port Hills and Christchurch area. Fiona?
Well, kia ora, namaste. Thank you very much, Mohini, for inviting us along, and for you for having us today to talk to you about the plants that we deal with here in New Zealand. So I think the main thing is that we're talking about weeds, and weeds, obviously, originally New Zealand has only been settled, or was only discovered really by the Polynesian settlers 800 years ago. So when you think about the world as a whole, New Zealand, it's very, very recent time that New Zealand has changed from being a totally isolated region to one which is now populated. 800 years by the Polynesians. They then became the Maori, and now, hold on, I'm being told how to, hold on 1 second. Thank you. Yep, sorry. So New Zealand is one of the most isolated places on earth. The Maori settled 800 years ago, and then European settlers, they first arrived just on expedition ships, but the first settlers arrived just over about 170 years ago to Christchurch. So it's very, very recent times that they have changed the original native flora and fauna by bringing in their own plants and animals with them. So before the Maori came, more than 80% of the country was covered in native forest, and the Maori brought with them their own food and plants, so that they, on their expeditions, so that they were able to eat, because they didn't know what they were going to find here. So they started to clear some of the area around the coast for their own settlements and for hunting parties. And then in the 18th century, the European colonizers came, and they wanted to recreate what they left back, mainly from the UK. So they brought their own flowers and trees, their vines and their shrubs, to create their gardens, just to remind them of home. They also brought with them, rats. The rats actually came with the Maori originally, but cats, various large animals for hunting that they wanted to hunt. They brought in possums, they brought in stoats, weasels, rats. So lots of things that weren't here before, which ended up being very detrimental to the mainly ground living native birds that were here in the past. So the forest, 80% was originally covered in forest. It was cut down primarily for farmland, and also to make timber for building, and also timber for shipbuilding. And so the farming practices, they cleared a lot of the land, and they brought in what has become a weed for hedges. And one of them is brought from Scotland, and is a gorse bush, which has got a very prickly exterior. So this slide just indicates this is what the land forest was like in the 1840s to now. So you can see how much deforestation has actually occurred during that time, and the majority of it is for land and for farmland and for settlements. So what is a weed? A weed is an invasive plant. It gets called an invasive species, or a weed, or a pest plant. And it's a plant which is in the wrong place, and it starts to adversely affect the native flora and fauna. So the weeds, they outcompete the native plants that were originally there. So in New Zealand, different weeds in different areas, it's very, very regional. So there's some plants which don't occur in the Christchurch area, but which are very, very weedy in the North Island. So when I'm speaking about the weeds today, it's only weeds that I personally have got knowledge of and that deal with on a day-to-day basis that are affecting the reserves, the native areas that we are regenerating forest in the regional parks around about Christchurch. So weeds are usually very fast growing in comparison to natives, and they very quickly take over and outcompete the natives, also, which can in turn make the native plants extinct. And they are very, very difficult to actually eradicate. There's only a few weeds which have been successfully eradicated in New Zealand, difficult and expensive to get rid of. Councils, the local councils, and the Department of Conservation, who look after the entire country, between us all, we spend millions of dollars every single year to try to work on weed control. Landowners, farmers, everybody has to contribute. So it's weeds are costly to the native bush because it's helping to destroy it, but it's also costly in terms of price and cost, monetary cost as well. So one weed which we have, which is throughout the entire country, is what we call wilding pines. These are pines which have blown from commercial pine plantations. Pine and timber is one of our top exports, but wilding pines are actually one of our top weeds. This is in one of our reserves. This is an area called this is one of our reserves here, and where Helen's going to be talking about is just over the other side of the hill here at Ohinatahi. So as we see wilding pines come up, we try to get rid of them. One way is by cutting them down. Another way is we would actually drill a hole around the entire trunk, round the bottom, about 5 centimetres apart. We'd drill a little hole, or a fairly large hole, and then we would inject that hole, fill it with a glyphosate herbicide, and that would actually kill the pine standing. So we do that for the larger plants. So some of the weeds that we have, which are particularly invasive, are various smothering vines. So here we've got old man's beard, which is a clematis. It's Clematis vitalba, and that originally escaped from gardens. So a lot of the weeds that we have in Christchurch have all originated from gardens. So the birds take the seeds, or the wind blows the seeds, and they start to settle in our bush. And vines, especially old man's beard, and this one, banana passion vine, which is part of the Passiflora species, they grow very, very rapidly, and they completely smother the native bush. Each strand grows about 10 meters per year. And here you can see Japanese honeysuckle, which is Lonicera, and it just completely starts to take over. And this is the native bush behind, and it's just all being engulfed and smothered in this vine. So ways that we control these vines, we have to crawl through the undergrowth, looking for the stems that come from them, find out where the stem is going into the ground, cutting it off, and then hanging the remaining stem up, or anything we cut, we have to hang it up into the trees so that it doesn't stay on the ground, because if they stay on the ground, they will reroot. So once we cut them off, we then paste them with, we use a glyphosate gel. If the plants are small enough, and if they're not in an area that it would be detrimental to other weeds, if we were to spray to native plants, if we were to spray them, then we can spray these with This would be a mexofuron herbicide. This one and this one is a triclophor. So we would, if they were small enough, or if they're covering an area like blackberry that is not a native, and it doesn't matter if it gets sprayed, then we will spray them. But generally, these are scrambling over native plants. We don't want the overspray or to damage our natives, so we will go ahead and do the more time-consuming method, which is finding the stem, finding the base where they come from the ground, and paint them, cut them and paint them. So some of the trees or some of the plants are water or bird dispersed. So this plant here is a gunnera, which is a Chilean rhubarb. It's a huge plant, as you can see, and this is growing right beside a little stream. And these are the flower heads here, and these are filled with seeds. The birds eat the seeds and they can disperse them, but more often or not, they break off, they fall into the streams, and they get washed down the stream. And gradually they'll completely choke the stream, which then affects the native fish and our native eels, which are in the streams. So very, very invasive, and just completely starts to take over and completely change the habitat. Another plant, this is dispersed by birds. It's got a very colourful, pretty little flower. Darwin's barberry. This is one which it is in the Port Hills. We're trying to, if we can, we're trying to eradicate this one, because in terms of weeds, there's actually relatively few of them in comparison to other weeds. But this is one which, again, we would use we could either spray it with a triclophor, or we can spray around the bottom of the stem, leave the plant standing, and spray around the bottom of the stem with the brand name is X-Tree Basil, which is a petroleum-based triclophor herbicide. So people disperse plants, sometimes completely unknowingly, on their clothing or on their footwear. Sometimes they're spread on purpose, because they're a pretty plant, that they're sold in tourist areas, and I've got an example shown later. Some weeds come in on the road, on the gravel, it's taken in from a river or from somewhere. The road surface is put down, and lots of weeds that weren't there before start to come along the road edges. And then another waste is by garden waste. People just think, oh, it's garden waste, it will rot down, it doesn't matter. They dump their weeds by the roadside, and suddenly the weeds take off. So this is just why I do what we do. I think I seem to have lost some of my slides, but that doesn't matter. So why do we do? So we do restoration planting in our reserves, and this is just an example of an area which used to just be bare paddock 10 years ago, and it was volunteers have come along and planted, and the reserves have definitely grown up. And so we do a weed control so that the reserves don't get completely engulfed in weeds. And we do it so that we've got some of our beautiful flowers, which our native birds, they come along and they eat them, or they drink the nectar from the flowers. This is an example of one of our restoration planting sites. There was a fire went through in 2017 and completely took out all the vegetation that was here. So it left us with a bit of a blank canvas. And so we had a big volunteer planting program, and we planted back 8,000 trees that winter in 2017. And I went back to try to find the exact location that I had been standing here in 2024. And you can see this is Quail Island, where Mohini and Helen do a lot of work. And that's the top of Quail Island just appearing here. Yep, just here. And this is the Littleton Harbour, Whakaraupo. That's the end of Whakaraupo there. So this is almost the exact same location, six 6 years, 7 years apart. So it's amazing just how much plantings we've done and how much it's coming up. So also the weeds do affect the crags in the local area, and we've got some very delicate plants there. This is a forget-me-not, which is endemic to the area, the Christchurch area and the hills, the Port Hills. This is a little forget-me-not, Littleton forget-me-not. And then this little sun hebe, the Veronica lavaudiana, it's a heliohebe. And then we've also got a very rare fort fern called a Mesitras horomaka, and that's in Banks Peninsula. So everything that we're doing is to prevent weeds from coming and engulfing these plants. So there are acts. There's national legislation has now been passed that the government does recognise how much within such a short time, 180 years really, that plants have come along, been introduced, and it's causing a lot of problems. So there's been various acts have been passed in New Zealand. It's very difficult now to bring any plant material into New Zealand, and it all has to be checked really carefully. The Nacella Tussock Act, landowners, this is a type of a grass which spreads very rapidly. And so as landowners, as a council landowner, every year we have to go through any paddocks we have and grub out any Nacella tussock that we find. We have to keep a note of the numbers that are found, and then we have to pass that on to our local, our regional council, which is ECAN, Environment Canterbury, and they take a note of all the landowners, how much tussock has actually been taken out off the land. So lots of plant quarantine regulations, and there's also the Biosecurity Act, which has got the National Pest Plant Accord. That list is reviewed every few years, and there's currently 200 plants that are on that list as being they are not allowed to be propagated or sold in New Zealand. In New Zealand as a whole, there's about 25,000 different types of different plants. 81% of those plants are not indigenous. Only 9% of the plants in New Zealand are actually native to New Zealand, and then just over 200 of those plants there are over 200 plants which are really threatening to our land. So because of conservation, now over 30% of the total land area in New Zealand is actually protected conservation land. And that's everything from I have to say about the Christchurch City Council. So I've enjoyed talking to you, and I'll hand you over now to Mohini, who will introduce you to Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for your wonderful presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. That was very informative. So I'll briefly introduce Helen Hills, and she's going to talk mainly about Ohinetahi Reserve, where she's very active. So Helen, she's a physiotherapist, a hand therapist by profession, and she used to work at the Christchurch Public Hospital. And 4 years ago, she decided to resign. She retired, and she wanted to devote her life to plants, to conservation mainly, right? So I mean, it's amazing. And honestly, I haven't seen her happier before. She's just so happy every day. She's busy, and I must say that Helen and Fiona, they have a very sustainable lifestyle. They are always on their bike. I mean, Fiona travels about 36 kilometers every day on your bike to go to work, and Helen is always on her bike as well. So Helen, she's a dedicated conservation practitioner. She's a committee member of the North Canterbury branch of Forest and Bird. She works for the Summit Road Society, Linda Woods Reserve, Quail Island. She's a trustee on Quail Island Ecological Restoration Board. So she's everywhere in Christchurch, helping out lots of people. And not just plants, but she was recently involved also in a protest on a riverbed for the seabirds' eggs, wasn't it?
River birds.
River birds.
Yeah.
Sorry, the river birds.
For vehicles.
So
Against vehicles in the rivers.
against
nesting time.
yeah, so for the nesting time, usually the vehicles go on the riverbeds, and she was bravely standing there with her placard, and so she is always involved in doing the good for the animals and the planet and the plants. So I'll pass it over to her.
Okay, I'll use the down arrow.
Yeah.
Namaste, kia ora. Thank you for inviting us to speak about weeds. As my friend Mahini put us up to this. And I just have to accentuate that I am a volunteer. I'm not a scientist or anything like that. So it's just coming from a volunteer point of view. So I'm going to talk about Hinatahi Reserve, which is a reserve on the Port Hills that I volunteer for. So go here, Mahini.
Yeah.
Oh, nothing happening. Oh, can you use this?
Yeah.
Oh,
Show
okay.
them where you.
Sure. So this is Horse Banks Peninsula, and this is the Littleton Harbour, Whakaropo, and these are the Port Hills. Called Port Hills because this is Littleton Port, and here's Christchurch here, 400,000 people. So Hinatahi is a reserve just in this area here on the Littleton Harbour side of the Port Hills. And I think if you went back, you can see it's actually the inside of a volcano. So it's an ancient volcano, 8 million years old. So it's extinct. We don't have to worry about it erupting, which is good. So here's a photo I took just a couple of days ago. It's got some lovely bush areas, lovely native ferns, trees. In itself, it is a piece of regenerated bush. It's not ancient bush. It was burnt, as Fiona was saying, when the Europeans came about 170 years ago. A lot of the Port Hills were cleared for farming. So this actual bush, well, it's beautiful now, it's probably only about 70 years old, something like that. So, but it has grown to be a lovely piece of bush. And can I play while I was there, and this is to show you too why we do it, is that the native bush sustains a lot of native birds and lizards, whereas a lot of the weeds don't. So I'm just going to play, while I was walking through there, this is what you could hear. Can I hear that? So this, I hope you can hear that. It's our native bellbird or kuramako bird. So while we're walking to this other reservoir, there's all these birds singing, and they're there because there's plenty of food, and also there's some pest control of mustelage, which is stoats and cats, not cats, stoats and weasels, rats and possums. So that's just an example of what we can enjoy at Hiniwai. Okay. So carry on. So when you talk about the Devrai. To me, a Hinatahi is a bit like, it's my church, I suppose. When I go into the bush, that's kind of like, that's how I go to church. So a Hinatahi means one daughter in Māori, who are the indigenous people of New Zealand, and Hinatahi, she was the daughter of Chief Te Rangi Whakaputa. It's a 150 hectare reserve on the Littleton side of the Port Hills, as I said, and it's owned by the Summit Road Society since 1993. And the Summit Road is a charitable trust. It was farmland, but now it's regenerated. Some of it is regenerated native bush, some of it is still farmland. So it sort of doesn't have any stock or sheep or cattle on it. but some of it's still grassland and a lot of it is very weedy. It's maintained by volunteers. It's a volunteer group of about 10 people every Tuesday. We go out there, we clear tracks, we seek out weeds such as Fiona was talking about, the old man's beard and passion vines, and we do pest control as well. And I've just mentioned the pests there again, rats, mustelids, possums, hedgehogs that will eat the native birds' eggs, and the native bird chicks and the lizards as well, and the possums, which are introduced from Australia. They eat the trees, and they can kill the trees if there's enough of them. So the Summit Road Society, there was a man called Harry Out, and he was a local politician, and then he actually became a member of Parliament, and he advocated for the formation of the Summit Road on the Port Hills and 3 resting houses that walkers could use to stay in. And this happened sort of before the Second World War, but during the war they all fell into disrepair. But then in 1948, his grandson, who was John Jameson, wanted to restore the Port Hills again and the resting houses, and he formed the Summit Road Society. So that their goal is to preserve and protect nature and the beauty of the Port Hills for everyone to enjoy. So although it's private land, that's open to the public for everyone to go into and walk and enjoy. Ohinatahi Reserve is under a Kiwi2 covenant, which means that it's protected in perpetuity. So for some reason, if that land was sold, it cannot be burnt down or cut down or made into houses. It has to stay as a lovely piece of bush or regenerating bush. So here's a photo of Ohinatahi, and you can sort of see here, this is up here, further apart is not so much. So here we have, that's Orongomai. So you can see that there's a lot of farmland still with gorse bushes. This is some native kānuka, and there's some regenerating native bush. You can see it's very volcanic because it's an extinct volcano. And I just showed this photo here because it's quite interesting, because this area was actually burnt in 2017, and this area this was all burnt in 2017, this whole thing, and then again in 2024 this area was burnt down here. So that's a rather sad event. And so this shows it again. So there's the same Rock Point, Orongomai, and we're on this side of it here. So this must be quite an old photo. Yeah, so this is the 2017 fire, the whole lot. And then again in 2024, the Port Hills fires came around here, down this ridge here again. So the same area was burnt twice. So the goal is to, when Ohinatahi was set up in 1993, the goal was to restore the native forest through natural regeneration. So not with too much planting of native trees. And Mohini is going to talk about Peniwai, and it's called the Hugh Wilson Peniwai method. So, which was very successful at Peniwai, and it's using some of the exotic weeds such as gorse and broom and blackberry that eventually native seeds would be dropped there by the birds and grow through those gorse bushes and broom bushes. And if they get tall enough, they shade those gorse and broom and weeds out, and the weeds die, and then you have native bush. So that was, and Hugh Wilson actually did the botanical survey of Ohinatahi when Ohinatahi was first bought. So that's the plan. But there is a difference between Peniwai and Ohinatahi, because at Ohinatahi on the Port Hills, we're much drier than Peniwai is further over to the south of Banks Peninsula. Our rainfall is 650 millimetres. The rainfall at Peniwai is 1700 millimetres. So it's quite a lot of difference. And because of that dryness, that natural regeneration through the gorse, and the broom and the blackberry takes a lot longer. It's much slower. So therefore we have a lot of weeds. The gorse is there for longer, and it is all very flammable. So all the gorse, the broom, and the honeysuckle and the blackberry are all highly flammable. So we have that stage of flammability is long, and that's sort of quite dangerous for us because we're also near some pine plantations, and Fiona talked about pine trees which are grown for timber, which there are some grown near our reserve, and unfortunately they can catch fire, and that's where the fires started. It swept through the Port Hills and into our reserve. So we're also near a large city, and so we have the same problem with people probably dumping weeds, but also we're right near some suburban gardens below Ohinatahi Reserve. Is a bay, Governor's Bay, and there are houses with all their lovely gardens. But again, the birds and the wind distribute those garden plants up into the reserve. So I just mentioned that the fire risk was dry. We had vandals, unfortunately, because we're near a large urban area. They like to drive across the Port Hills, set off fireworks, and do all sorts of crazy things. So the risk of fire is greater than it would be at Haniwai, where it's much more in the country. So this is just showing the gorse. When the gorse gets really big, initially it's mother's weeds, but when it gets to be older, maybe 10, 15 years, it grows a bit more like has a trunk and grows up, and it's actually underneath. The ground is quite clear, and when the native seeds are dropped by the birds, they can engage then with the soil, and some native plants just love that shady area, so it can act like a nursery for these native plants, like mahoi here, which will grow up and eventually shade out the gorse. So that's that principle here. It's nice to see all those wee seedlings growing underneath the bush, and know that they're going to come and eventually grow out that gorse. Of course, this doesn't happen on the cliffs or the crags where trees aren't going to grow as big, so that's where the gorse persistence is a bit more difficult to deal with. So we have a range of walking tracks for Hinatahi that the public can enjoy. I'm going to spend that one twice. So I'm rolling. Sorry, it's me pointing the wrong arrow. Pardon me. So here we are. This is about the fires. If you can see here, I just got the sort of off the web. So here's Christchurch over here. The port there. The fine pine forests are here. So the fires sweep around here. And unfortunately, they actually went up and then down into Haniwai. So here's our reserve here, this funny shaped sort of square-headed duck or something. And so in this 2017, about a third of the reserve was burnt, and then again in 2014 it swept down here again, and this reserve here, this is the one here in 2024, coming down the ridge, that's it there. And this one I think is from 2017, showing further over here, and then looking over to that ridge. Guessing this is, it's a bit hard to tell, but you can see it's a much bigger area. The gullies fortunately weren't burnt because they are much more, there's less gorse, and they're much more just the forest, like that lovely picture I showed you, and they're damper, and they're less flammable. So weeds, unfortunately, weeds such as broom and gorse and honeysuckle, they're highly flammable. Native plants generally are less flammable, apart from perhaps kanuka, which is a colonising plant, which is actually flammable. But often if they meet the native bush, it doesn't tend to burn as well as the gorse does. Fire, when you have a fire, there's a lot of gorse and broom seeds in the soil, and they are actually, fire activates their germination. So after a fire, you get a thicket of gorse and a thicket of broom growing. There's no room for any natives at all. And also the roots of the weeds, such as blackberry and gorse, and can just re-sprout as well. Honeysuckle does as well. And blackberry particularly just sprouts beautifully, again, from the roots after a fire. The weeds grow much quicker. Native plant seeds can't get to the soil to germinate, and any small plants are smothered by this thicket of weeds. And it takes a long time then until the weeds are really, really big, and then you might get some native seeds growing underneath. So the weeds that we do control, there's quite a lot of them, and I won't go name them all, but again, the main ones, as Fiona said, is banana passion vine, the old man's beard, because they smother the native forest. The spur valerian is particularly a bad one on the cliffs because it smothers native plants such as the Littleton forget-me-not. We do actually have it, Ohenatahi, and they're not big enough to sort of kind of overshadow these weeds. They're not going to grow into a tree. The other ones are sort of garden escapees, mainly. And so if we find them, we generally cut and paste them and try and get rid of them as much as we can. So the weeds that we do tolerate, so apart from we get a lot of weeds, of course, we've got to keep them off our tracks. So we spend, as volunteers, we spend a lot of time cutting gorse, cutting blackberry back from the tracks so that we can get through there and the public can get through there to enjoy their walks. But apart from that, in the rest of the reserve, we don't worry about them too much. There's hectares of it and we cannot possibly control them, and eventually, hopefully, the natives will grow through. And the pasture grasses, we don't do much about those unless we're actually spraying around plants that we have planted, the restoration planting that we do now, because we do try and do some restoration planting as a green fire break in particular areas where we think the fire may come down again, hopefully not, or where we border onto another landowner. One thing about gorse is that we do have to control it 10 metres from our borders with our neighbours. That's a sort of legal requirement that we do need to do. So there's those same photos that Fiona's shown you already, banana passion vine, old man's beards, smothering, and we do the same things. We get underneath and cut them. There's the spur valerian. It's a very pretty weed, and a lot of these weeds are very pretty because they're from people's gardens. And I think I read one thing when I was looking up about the weeds is that 75% of the invasive species in New Zealand were actually introduced purposely for gardens. So there's your gorse, beautiful yellow colour, and they have a lovely smell, don't they? It has a lovely smell, but they're just a kind of a smothering. You can actually see a little winding pine there as well. And everyone thinks, well, that's really, really pretty, and but you can see there's very little room for anything else to grow, and it's all highly vulnerable to fire. So the weeds we do is similar to what Fiona does, exactly the same thing. We cut and we paste. Sometimes we just with either a brush with some, we use Torton sometimes, just in the bottle with a wee brush, so it's very specific to the area, or glyphosate, same thing. We drill and fill as Fiona does with the pines into elderberries and the occasional pine, but we fortunately don't have too many wilding pines, and we spray with glyphosate just around any native plants that we have planted. We don't tend to spray a lot. The city council does do some helicopter spraying of the cliffs for spur valerian. I don't know if we pay for that or you pay for that. But anyway, that does happen sometimes. Or sometimes abseilers go down and they actually spot spray or cut and paste the spur valerian. That's very expensive, and then sometimes we need to seek funding to do that. There is biological control, and actually Ohenatahi, I think, was one of the places where they released the broom mite, and it has been quite successful in that the broom in Ohenatahi, so it sucks the sap out of the out of the broom weakens the plant. And you can see that a lot of the broom in our hinatahi is actually quite sort of poorly and thin, and it's more lightened, and then hopefully you get more natives instead of just blackberry growing. But sometimes you just get blackberry growing. There's gorse weevils that have been for a long time in New Zealand. We don't see much notice. There's very healthy gorse there. And I think a new thing is that there's an old man's beard eryphoid mite released. That's fairly new, and it might be some time before we actually see anything, but until they build up a population. Fiona mentioned also the National Pest Plant Accord, so it's an agreement between DOC and regional councils. It's a list of plants that can't be sold in plant nurseries, and you're not allowed to move them. Some of them you can have in your garden, but you're not allowed to shift them or give them to people. So we've got some of those plants in our reserve, and that's the sort of view that we have from Ohanatahi. So we go there and everywhere, and the best place to have your lunch in the whole wide world, in my mind, is to sit and admire this beautiful view of Whakaropo, Littleton Harbour, which is just magical. And we do have quail on there that Mohini and I also volunteer at. And when I'm on Ohanatahi, I can look over and I can see Ohanatahi. So yeah, it's great. So thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much.
Is it long?
Thanks, Helen. That was really interesting. So I'm going to briefly talk about Hinewai Reserve. And I hope, Priya, we have enough time, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So again, like I said to you that I'm just a volunteer and I'm just interested and keen in restoring as much native forest as we can. And Hinewai Reserve is over here. So I think by now probably you have kind of got a good idea about where we are. So that's Christchurch here. And this is the Banks Peninsula, and it's a beautiful drive to go to Hinewai Reserve. So Hinewai is mist, water. Hine is a maiden, so it's a mist maiden. It's a beautiful name. And this is a photo that I took one time when I was there. So basically, how did it come about? I'll just tell you a short story about it. So in 1980s, Hugh Wilson, he's a botanist, and I'll tell you more about him later. So he was doing a survey in that area. And what he found, that actually it was a farmland, marginal farmland, but that contained the remnant of old growth forest. And his theory was that we can actually use, like Helen said, use gorse as a canopy, as a nursery for native plants. And with Maurice White, who was a lawyer, and with him they founded a trust. And they bought 109 hectares in 1987. So that's about 38 years ago. And they have almost increased it to 1,600 hectares now to regenerated native bush. So it's pretty amazing what he's done there. And like we said earlier, it's basically using what you have instead of fighting with it, because fighting with ghosts is very difficult. So what Hugh has done is that he has used it as a nursery for the native plants. This is Hugh Wilson, and he's a hero here in New Zealand, especially in Canterbury. And basically what he's dedicated his life now, he lives there at Hinewai Reserve, and there was a beautiful film made on him. So later on, if you have time, do have a look at this movie. It's called Fools and Dreamers, and you can watch it free on YouTube. So I love this quote. He says that some people say, why are you restoring the forest? And it's as if it's like saying, why should you love your mother? And so it shows that love that he has. And मला असं वाटतं की इथे कुठेतरी आपण एक आपल्या इथे असं भूमाता किंवा सकाळी उठल्यावर पण आपण असं पटकन जमिनीला नमस्कार करतो. आणि ही जी एक कॉन्सेप्ट आहे की जमिनीला आई मानण्याची, आणि ती मला असं वाटतं की सेम कॉन्सेप्ट इथे बघितल्यावर मला थोडंसं आश्चर्य वाटलं आणि आय थॉट दॅट या दीज आर लाईक आपलं जे कल्चर आहे ते नॉट डिसिमिलर टू व्हॉट्स हिअर एज वेल. सो दिस इज ह्यू विल्सन अगेन. And what he's done, like Helen also mentioned, that देवराईमध्ये जसं आपलं असतं की आपण आपल्या इथे देवराईची खूप वेगळी कॉन्सेप्ट आहे, पण सिमिलर वाटली मला ही नेवाईशी, की जिथे जास्त इंटरफिअरन्स करत नाही आपण. देवराईमध्ये मला वाटतं नो इंटरफिअरन्स असतो, पण इथे मिनिमम इंटरफिअरन्स आहे. आणि हा फोटो मी एकदा गेलेले असताना घेतला आणि इथे तुम्ही ओळखलं असेल सुनील आणि प्रिया जेव्हा आले होते मला भेटायला इथे तेव्हा 2019 साली. तर तेव्हा आम्ही अर्थातच सिनेवाईला गेलो त्यांना दाखवायला आणि तिथे तो त्यांच्यासाठी ऑटोग्राफ करतोय. तर खूप इंटरेस्टिंग आहे ह्यूची स्टोरी, कारण बिकॉज व्हेन ही स्टार्टेड दिस प्रोजेक्ट इन 1987 देर वॉज nobody who agreed with him, around him especially. And he was called as, a fool and a dreamer. They are like, this is not going to be successful. And why are you fighting with ghosts? But he's proven to be an ecological visionary. He's a botanist and he knew what he was doing, but he believed in his vision. And as you can see today, it has grown into 1,600 hectares of native forest. If you ever visit New Zealand, it's a must-see place for you. And he's the heart and soul of Hinevai. Like I said to you, he's dedicated, he lives there, and he seldomly comes to Christchurch, and he calls Christchurch as the car-infested swamp. So he doesn't like going there, when he enjoys his time. And the funny thing is that quite often people ask him that, oh, you live on your own here. And he says, yes, but the world comes to meet me. And literally, when you go there, you see people from all over the world. They go and visit Hinevai. So millions and millions of regenerating native trees in this area now, in the 1,600 hectares. And I'll tell you more about carbon sequestration. But this is sold, the carbon credits that they sell, they get a biodiversity premium, because of the diversity, obviously, that they have there. And 1 hectare of the regenerated forest, it sequesters about 10 tons of carbon dioxide each year. And usually the price range is about 15 to 70 per ton. But still, it proves to be a very beneficial proposition for them. And another thing I quite like about Hugh and his principles is that he says that we ethically vet every business. So they only sell to businesses who are committed to carbon zero. So I think that they are very conscientious about who they sell their credit to as well. And because of this regeneration of native forest and being able to sell carbon credits, they have been able to expand from 109 hectares to over 1,600 hectares. This is a beautiful photo of a gecko, a jeweled gecko. And I think I remember seeing one there as well. And they are not very easily seen, are they?
No.
Because they camouflage themselves quite well. But one time I caught a gecko just sunning herself on a beautiful tree. So I was looking at this and I thought, well, I mean, Hinevai is like an ecological jewel of Aotearoa, New Zealand as well. And it's only because of what Hugh's vision was, and he pursued it effortlessly. And today everybody is able to see the benefits of that. So from a ghost-infested farmland, it's an internationally recognized rewilding regeneration project. So when I say minimum interference, of course, I mean, it's not like they don't do anything, but there is decades of weed and pest control, constant communication, education, awareness, track maintenance, boundary ghost control. And it's also, what is I think interesting is that holding on to a vision, because when everybody thought that he's, nobody believed in him, but he believed in vision and he followed that. And a result of that is it's a beautiful place today where anybody can go there and visit. And you are only allowed to go on foot and you cannot take your dogs there. There are about 50 waterfalls and there are numerous walks. I mean, there are short walks, long walks, whatever time you have to spend there, and whatever, it depends on your fitness as well. So recently they have bought land that connects Hinewai to the sea. And I think that was quite a big occasion for them, that now from sky to the sea, Hinewai is connected. And it's part of the Banks Peninsula Walk, which about over 2,000 people walk every year. So they get some income through that as well. So this Banks Peninsula Walk, basically, it's the farms around Hinewai, 3-4 farmers, they have come together and they have got this Banks Peninsula Walk. I was just looking at TripAdvisor this morning, and it says that this is an absolute must visit for locals and tourists. So imagine in 1987, it was just a marginal farmland with not much native forest. And today it's absolutely, you see abundance of native forest there. Another thing about Hugh is its communication. And so there is this PPP, which is the newsletter that he actually, it's handwritten and then of course printed, but he handwrites it. And so you can see that it's published twice a year, so 30 years of it. And what I thought was really interesting for the presentation today is here, if you look at the photo points, so that's the photo point in 1988, and you can definitely see a lot of yellow here, which is gauze and broom. And then in 2000, again, you see that there is, a lot of change. And definitely in 2023, you can see that it's almost fully covered with native forest. So in one generation, you can see that how much he has changed the ecological balance in the Banks Peninsula area. So here are just some links for you to have a look at. We are happy to share the slides if anybody is interested. And just a thank you to all of you for listening. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Should I stop sharing now, Priya?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mohini, Helen, and
Oh, yeah, she is. Oh, I just.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, it is open for everyone. Please unmute yourself and ask the questions. All our 3 dedicated women are here and ready to give the answers now.
our one more colleague from MVS, Badve sir, is also here. He is ex-forest officer, very senior officer. Maybe he can have some questions. Vinaya madam is also here.
I'm also interested in knowing about how different it is in India, because honestly, when I was in India, I wasn't really aware of we used to do a lot of planting, but I was not involved with weeds so much. So do you see any similarities, the experts here?
Maybe Upadhyay madam, yeah, she can answer your question.
Yes, yes. There are definitely certain similarities how we work. We actually first study the area, then we have surveys, local surveys there, and then we concentrate because we have many species. The number of species is more, I think, in the. And actually, just now we have talked about the plants only, but as in my introduction, I spoke about the food chain and food web, then it is really different. Fortunately, unfortunately, whatever it is, you can say, but the conservation areas in India, they are more for the animals and not for the plants. That's one thing we have to remember well. Very few here and there, they are there. And there is different for the conservation area and preserve forest. So the categories are different. So that is the main difference. And animals, they are more dependent on their food plants. So the food web is very strong. That's why the complete habitat or the environment is very, very important. Yes, NGOs, they are working a lot. And like New Zealand is a, island. So for India also from three sides, the east and west coast, we have uh, many coastal plants. But I wonder in your presentation, what about the mangroves? Do you have any mangrove species there in New Zealand which are very dominant in the coastal area?
Mangroves, oh, mangroves. We've got native mangroves in them.
Mangroves means they are tolerant to the saline plants, so, in salinity. So they grow and they have very different type of their lifestyle. They show the viviparous germination. They show the uh, root adaptations as they have to grow on the seashores. So actually, we are more concentrating on such type of things. So I wonder, as an island, so you must be having certain species which are there than that of the land species nearer to the sea. So the plants, they are tolerant to the salinity. Are there few?
We have native mangroves, but that's in the more in the North Island where it's warmer. We don't have them down here. We don't have mangroves in this, as far as I know, on the South Island, but
Okay,
but
but
in the North Island.
they must be there. They must be there, which are
They're in the
going on the
Yeah, in the North Island where it's warmer.
So they are in the North Island.
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
It's colder down here.
maybe, but because they actually protect all the coastal line.
Yes,
They are
yes.
they
And
are
they're like a fish
more
nursery as well.
more important. I think so. The mangroves, I was
I think
wondering.
people are realising the importance of the mangroves
Yeah,
for preventing erosion
Yeah,
of,
yes,
yeah.
from the sea and also as a fish nursery area. Yeah.
yes, yes. And more about I would like to ask about the plant quarantine regulations. Because in India, yes, the regulations, they are there, but as it is, more coastlines, the regulations, so there are certain, other things also going on. So what's the situation in the New Zealand?
As far as I know, you're not allowed to bring any plants into New Zealand.
Yeah,
You,
you're not.
you must be having a very strong quarantine law.
Well, they have, I think at the airports and that, they have the customs officer, and they probably have, I think they have sniffer dogs as well to try
Are
and
there,
keep any fruit
are there
or-
any special trainings for this such type of quarantines and for those officials who practice
Yeah.
quarantine?
Yeah, so they are generally, they've been trained ecologists and biologists, so they're employed by um
customs.
the
I suppose.
customs and the what they call MPI, which is the
Minister of Primary
Minister of
Industries.
Primary Industries. So and they employ them and so they're trained in
Biosecurity.
biosecurity. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
I was just interested in one more thing, that list of illegal plants. I mean, that's very interesting thing because here most of the time, as you said, there are escapes from garden escapes, and
Yeah.
people unknowingly they get the beautiful looking plants, and like we have a cosmos as a weed, and it is really havoc here, which was brought in the garden first. So
Right.
I think this is a really very interesting thing which you have adopted, and maybe we too can adopt that. Maybe we can make a list of all these things where maybe by raising awareness, or maybe by sensitizing nursery owners to not to get these kind of things, because
Yeah.
they are not aware that what can happen 10 years down the line.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting point which I got in your from your
Yeah.
lecture. And another thing was using gore as a nursery thing. That was also very interesting thing, that instead of fighting with it, why not use it as a
Yes. Yes.
means to restore. Thank you very much. कुणाला मराठी प्रश्न विचारायचा असेल तरी विचारू शकता. मे बी मोहिनी कॅन आन्सर और मोहिनी ट्रान्सलेट करू.
Translate, yes,
हा,
you can translate.
म्हणजे तुम्ही अनम्यूट करून मराठीत पण प्रश्न विचारू शकता.
What about invasive plants from other places, say Asia or US or something? Give some examples from India. Any plant you have?
From India, but no,
I don't know what
हिमालयन
some of them
हिमालयन
are-
हिमालयन हनीसक्कल इकडचा आहे असेल.
Honeysuckle is the plastic, yes.
Yeah, you've got
As
them
name
yeah,
indicates it is.
all over the place, really.
Yes, a lot of the
Chile,
plants, yeah,
Mediterranean.
yeah, so a lot of the plants come from the Mediterranean or from
Mm.
South America or even North America. I mean, the list, I haven't gone through the list of over 200. You can certainly go through them and find out where they originally came from, but most of them are, well, we call them exotic because they're from outside New Zealand.
Yeah.
So anything at all that comes in. But yes, so
all
for
around the
example,
world.
Old Man's Beard, it's native to Europe and Southwest Asia. So if we went there, we would see it growing.
Southeast.
That's their natives. The Japanese honeysuckle, that's native to Japan. So invasive here because the conditions here, I guess it's probably the growing conditions here allow it to become invasive, whereas in its natural habitat in Japan, I guess there's other
Insects,
restraints
something.
to it that actually prevents it from becoming invasive in that area. So although it's a native to some area and it's not invasive there, it does come here, and because of the growing conditions, it becomes invasive here.
Do you think Fiona Gorse is from Scotland?
I think it's
Is it?
That's from UK.
UK,
They brought it here as
Because-
a hedge plant.
As a hedge.
Hedge plant,
Yeah, it was a
and
hedge-
now
It was a
because
hedge plant
of the
for farms, but it grows so much bigger here than it ever grows
quite favorable
in
conditions to
UK.
grow.
and yeah, so it just spread like.
Mayuri has raised her hand. Maybe you can just unmute yourself and ask the question, please.
Thank you first
Thank
of
you.
all. It was really interesting. रोहित आणि मला एक प्रश्न आहे. So रोहित बोला.
तुम्हाला गव्हर्नमेंट काही सपोर्ट करतं का? Do you have to lobby to the government or does the government support you at all?
You mean,
Well,
yeah, for
City council is it's a local government, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does that mean?
Yep, but so we.
But what about you, Ohidetani?
Oh, well, we often, well, sometimes we apply for grants for weed control. That would be Summit Road Society. So they would apply for grants from maybe Environment Canterbury or other places for money to control weeds. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that's what. I would also like to add that I was telling you about Hinevai, and they have got their own selling of carbon credit. That's a way of raising money.
Yes.
And also they have about over 2,500 subscribers to the newsletter. I know that because I helped them write addresses and envelope it as well.
Yeah.
And so they have support from all over the world. And honestly, like almost from every country in the world, like they have heard of Hinevai also because of the movie. So I think most of these trusts are run really on people support, what you say?
Yes, and sometimes on the smell of an oil rag, really, like, not very much funding at all. When you think of like Koala and Port Mahua, so it's very small amount of funding. And again, it's applying for different grants for money for trees, planting and weed control and that type of thing, isn't it? Yeah. So
That's indeed a great thing that it is more about with the people's participation. And this idea of subscription is also great idea to, raise funding.
That's where Hugh is very talented because he's a talented artist as well. When he writes the PPP, which actually means it's a brown creeper bird, the PPP, and he writes, and also he has little like kind of funny clips in it. He's just a very engaging person. So the whole everyone's like very keen to get the PPP and find out what's happening in Henniwai because of his writing and drawing. So we haven't got quite anyone like that at Ohinatali. So.
We have only one Hugh.
Only one Hugh is rather special. Yeah.
Because I was also interested in fundraising because as Fiona rightly said that they spray all over. So spraying over a huge area is very costly affair for us, at least for the Indians. So I was wondering how they must be, managing the spraying, and what used to be the frequency of spraying. Means once it is sprayed, how much time, the time gap is there, and again the spraying activity is on, like that. Is there any mathematics and that the area and spray and after, or season specifically, that how you manage spraying the huge area?
Yeah, so we generally, for some of the ones that I personally, so I do spraying myself, and it's for one of the weeds that I do a lot of, it's Spervalerian. So it's basically, we're at a stage of spot spraying. So we can spray and it's dry within half an hour, and so there's no withholding period. And so I'm not spraying like huge, great big areas. It's all very spot specific to the plant, and make sure there's no overspray. We do also helicopter spraying, and again it's a really small jet that goes out, and there's actually relatively minimal overspray with that, and it's literally individual plants that we're spraying. Different plants get sprayed at different times. We spray the Spervalerian twice a year because in the spring and in the autumn, because it flowers twice a year. So we want to spray it, and it's pretty much just seedlings or juvenile plants that we're down to on a whole, and we're getting them before they actually flower. So the only ones that we would maybe find and do when we find them when they're flowering, which is a good way of finding new infestations. But generally we're spot spraying. We're not spraying huge areas unless we've got a big area of a new infestation of say old man's beard, and then we would spray the whole lot. But generally they're in areas where people aren't going to be going. They're in areas away from tracks.
Oh, that's great, Fiona. Thanks for a very elaborated answer. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Occasionally, at another reserve, a Summit Road reserve called Linda Woods Reserve, they have used a contract drone sprayer to spray areas, like large areas of gorse, before they do restoration planting. So that's another method that can be used.
Because in India also forest fires, they are very common, and it's a cause for destruction of forests. That also the management of forest fire is also very, tedious job to manage.
Yeah. So a lot of the restoration plantings that the council do, and we've done at Henni-Tahi, they're use native plants that are low flammability. So there's certain varieties of plants that we use for those fire breaks. Green fire breaks, we call them. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
माणिक काही कॉमेंट्स आले आहेत मे बी.
वाचून दाखव ना तू चालेल.
अच्छा मीच वाचू.
वाच छान.
Vinaya Joshi madam has said amazing work indeed and wonderful presentation, would love to visit, especially for Henniwai. Really enjoyed the presentation, well done crew. Thank you for interesting information and informative lecture. Excellent lecture by Aparna Brahme. Dr. Mayuri Shinde, nice workshop. Thank you. So it was a good interaction indeed.
Yes. with this, I would like to say the speakers also, the काय, listeners are very pleased to your lectures, your passion, your wonderful work you are doing. And I would like to thank all three of you that you gave us such a beautiful, informative, wonderful lecture on this Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini. Uh, काय काय ग म्हणतात ह्याला, महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनी स्टेज. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Mohini. Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
Some of our friends have also joined, like Ruchira has also joined. So it was nice to see Mohini on the stage.
Well, I'm really a side actor. These are the main actors.
I know, but you brought them on this
Yeah.
like it's a teamwork, as we all also are working as a team for with the aim to preserve nature, conserve nature, or to learn through the interaction and sharing of work. So we all have a common passion, and
Yes.
you all are welcome to India because we have a huge biodiversity. So maybe you can come and visit our Devrai, that is a sacred grove. Maybe Mohini will tell you more about it. And
The biodiversity, what Priya said, that correct. The biodiversity regarding plants, regarding insect, fauna, flora, humans also. You will enjoy this
India,
biodiversity
yes,
in
yes.
India.
So do visit India, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. I will stop this.